Hey, everybody. Matt here from ClickBid, and it is the year end. Literally, I think we have one more day of 2025. Some of us would be very grateful for that. But like a lot of people in our industry, I thought I would also jump on the year end bandwagon and do a little bit of wrap up and summary of some of the things that I've seen and learned over 2025. I think there's just so much stuff. I feel like I've spent the entire year working in the AI tech craze and what's coming, what's capable, what's possible, what's hype, what's not hype, what should we be afraid of, what should we chuckle about, and so on. But my focus has been on how it impacts software companies, which is ClickBid and my side project Sapling, and then also nonprofits. Those are two very different worlds. Software companies and B2B is incredibly driven right now by AI, but nonprofits are a little bit different. And in my experience over the last 23 years, nonprofits are a little bit slower to adopt new technology, better or worse. It just is. And so, we're trailing a little bit on the nonprofit adoption. What I want to do is just some of the things that I've learned in 2025. I just wanted to share those for what it's worth. And then also a couple goals that I'm looking at in 2026, I think other nonprofits should be looking at too, after learning all the things that I've learned here in 2025. So lesson number one is what I call the hype. There is so much hype. I think I've kept YouTube podcasters in business watching so many videos. And, I watch a YouTube influencer talking about the latest and greatest tools and processes that you should be using. And if you're not, why not? You're being left behind. But, after watching these videos, being blown away, then I always take it right back to my terminal on my computer, the challenges that I have, running a software company or starting another project or creating an app. And I find myself never being able to reproduce the same results. It's, this sounded really good in the YouTube video, and it got me to click on the YouTube video and felt like that was the point. Click the video, get their views up, and then really none of what they're saying is replicable. Now, I shouldn't say none of. I've had a lot of great results. The problem has been finding the nuggets within all of the content. It's like drinking from a fire hose, watching videos on Claude, on Gemini, on ChatGPT, Cursor, terminal command line interfaces, and things like that. There's so much out there that when you do find something, you're not even sure if it's practical, but then when you try it, some of it is practical. What you're really trying to do is take the hype, try it, pull something out of it that you can walk away with so it doesn't feel like you just wasted an hour and a half of your time or a day in some cases. And then, making a note of it, knowing that, the pinnacle that they've broadcast in their YouTube video or whatever probably isn't realistic. And it was really meant for clicks. So lesson number two, really, this is a bit controversial and maybe a little bit of a shock value, but it's more of the same. What have I seen this year? More of what I've seen over the last 30 years being a software developer and in the tech world. There have been, having been through the dot-com bubble, you've probably heard this a million times like I have, that, we're comparing AI to the dot-com. The AI bubble is like the dot-com bubble, and when it pops, we're all going to be broke, the economy's going to tank, and all, again, a lot of hype, good for clicks, probably won't pan out the same way. But really, there is a lot of similarity in these tech revolutions. It's like a lot of things that we've seen before. People are saying it's a major displacement of jobs and a revolution like no other. Even former CEOs of massive companies that you would think are incredibly trustworthy are saying, there's a 10, 20% chance that the world is going to end. And I'm thinking, what? This is crazy. So, while we're trying to find this real value in AI, look at things like when the internet was created. It displaced people in a lot of different ways, brought information to the masses instead of having these silos of experts. But did it really displace experts? No, the experts just got more focused and more aligned with what they were doing. And maybe it thinned the herd a little bit, but sometimes that's a good thing because, you want the best of the best. Blockchain is another, I think, is a great example of a similarity between AI and a technology like blockchain. Because blockchain is, the underlying value is that it's immutable and you cannot change it. It is a source of truth that cannot be hacked. A lot of rules around it and a lot of technology. But anyway, it is a wonderful, incredible, brilliant way to look at truth and trustless verification, but it just hasn't been realized into the real world. I bet it's just a slow adoption. I think it's going to take a lot of time, but I do think the underlying technology of blockchain, I'm not talking about Bitcoin or Ethereum, I'm talking about the technology itself, is revolutionary and groundbreaking. And then there was a lot of fear and anxiety with all of these technologies, and it really hasn't come to pass. There have been challenges, but we've gotten through them, and this will be like no other. But what I think is important is to find, again, sifting through, like you're swimming through a sea of oatmeal or glue or something. It can feel like you're going nowhere and you're just stuck, but there is value in there, and it's worth trying to find it. Now, I will say lesson number 3, data organization is definitely blocking progress. So, take ClickBid, for example. About 4 years ago, we moved all of our data to a platform called HubSpot. And HubSpot it's the platform we chose, and we've been very happy. But it became our source of truth. It's where if I wanted to know what was going on with a specific nonprofit, I knew I had to go to HubSpot. But then, which is great, we're getting a single source of truth. And a lot of organizations are doing the same thing with CRMs. They're using packages like Virtuous or Salesforce or Neon or Bloomerang to organize all their data. But then there's other external data to that CRM that is equally as valuable as the CRM data. And what do I mean by that? So we also use Google Workplace. So we have a Google Drive. And I'll tell you, that thing is chocked full of logos, photos of events, standard operating procedures, how-to articles, spreadsheets. It's just, there's so much data in there that, yes, it's in a Google Drive, but it's separated from HubSpot. And in some cases, there are ways to connect the two. So to say, okay, well, I'm in HubSpot, I'm going to connect there's an integration with Google Drive. Great. But nothing happened. It just connected the two platforms. So I think what I learned was, even when you're trying your best, and we have over the last 2-3 years been trying to work internally on our processes to make them more structured, streamlined, efficient, so that, in our world, we need to keep costs as low as possible because we work with nonprofits. And so to do that, we get organized and we streamline and build efficiencies. But even still, we have these silos that I think what organizations are feeling the same way. I think you see it with an organization we have a Virtuous account, but we're using a GoFundMe. One of our volunteers got really excited about something, and so they set up a GoFundMe campaign. And then another person set up a different, online giving campaign. And then somebody else used Virtuous to do a giving campaign. And so you got all these different blocks of data in different places. And so the key that I learned is that it really exposed not dysfunction, but the disorganization, even when you're trying to be organized. And so that was a big kind of a wake up for me towards the end of this year. And I think that's going to have a huge impact. The last lesson I wanted to focus on is, what is the value of human interaction? All year long, whether you're taking a very superficial look at AI or you're actually diving in like I am and spending the vast majority of your week trying to unpack the value of AI, I think one of the big threats to what people are seeing is that there is a replacement of humanity with AI. People will say AI is thinking better than humans. Really, it's not, but there's a concern. So what are we to do? Are we just going to wait until this artificial intelligence becomes a super intelligence and then OpenAI tells us that's where we are now and now we're all just out of jobs? And no, I think what we're being forced to do is to really define what, especially in the nonprofit space, what makes us, what's the value of that human interaction? Nonprofits especially are trying to explain this value of personalization. we are not using AI. I think that we're telling our nonprofits we are not using AI in certain areas, even though we could. Like I said, I spend so much of my time in AI. Yep, I could replace a lot of different things with AI, but I choose not to, not because, well, because I don't think AI is at a place where it can do the things that we do as a company. I think everybody in our team has an incredible value in the place that they are in. And I also think that there is a value in talking and interacting with a real human being. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that every single touch point with our nonprofits or with our B2B companies has to be fundamentally human. It can be automated. A sales email is a sales email. I mean, if I'm reaching out to somebody for the first time, it's going to be, hey, my name's Matt. I'd love to connect. I don't want to waste your time, so I'm not going to create this, big flowery wordsmithed email. I would just like to introduce myself and, hey, can we talk? That doesn't have to be as personal as, hey, you just donated $1,000 to, our building campaign. I would like to reach out and let you know that that was awesome. Those are two different types of interactions that you can leverage some automation, some AI to help. Year-end receipting. So not giving your donors their receipts, those don't have to be, incredibly human generated. Those can be automated and potentially even more valuable that way because, then it's a more accurate. But that's a slippery slope. And so let's talk a little bit more about that. In the next section, what should our goals be in 2026? Well, it's the end of the year. So we're talking about what are our New Year's resolutions that we hope to keep for at least a month. My best approach is just keep it simple. I'm going to pick two, and there's probably 200, but I'm going to pick two that I think should be goals for nonprofits, for B2B, and I think that you'll get the most gains in 2026 as AI continues to advance. The first one is data. Your data should be in one place. There's really no amount of time and energy that is too much in this capacity, in my opinion. Now, what does this look like? Just because you have a CRM, that doesn't mean, oh, check, we're good. Because like I said, we have HubSpot. We have all our data in HubSpot, but we also have a massive amount of data over here. And then we've got some data over here. And then we use this tool over here. So in the nonprofit world, you have internal emails, Gmail, Microsoft Outlook, Yahoo, or whatever. That's a data warehouse. Your CRM, your Neon, Razor's Edge, Virtuous, Bloomerang, all of them. If you have a Microsoft 365 or Google Docs account, that's another data warehouse. That is going to create these different places where you really should be making sure that that data all interacts with each other. For instance, just because you have 4 free tools that you found online that are going to help you write content, do a free fundraising campaign, sell tickets to an event, and it's low cost or no cost, and then your CRM. It's good that you figured out how to get free tools, but the key is making sure that you get the data from those tools. Getting a donation is great, and it's one thing, but you want to make sure that it's being put into the right place so that in 6 months, when you've completely forgotten about that tool that you got for free, you don't have to think, oh no, where do I go to get that data now and bring it into my CRM? So I would say integrations are going to be key. Making sure that whatever platforms you're using, you have the ability to move that data out and into your source of truth. If you have a CRM, then that is by default your source of truth. If you need to find out about anything related to a person or an organization, you need to go to that CRM. You should not be going to a tool that you didn't pay for to get data. It needs to be integrated so that it is out of that platform, such that it could go away and you never see it again. But that's okay because the data made it into your CRM. That is going to be really important. And like I said, be militant, spend time, set milestones, things like that. Now, the second goal is the freedom to be thoughtful. That's what I called it, just kind of a flowery statement. But if AI is really going to help us in 2026, then it needs to elevate our time to do more meaningful stuff. Internally at our company, I say, your day is like a funnel, and you're going to spend that time somewhere inside that funnel doing specific things. And the bottom half of that funnel is you're answering the who, what and where questions. So if somebody wants to know where something is in ClickBid, yep, I can answer that. I can just send it to you. Here's the link, here's the whatever. Or what do I do if I'm trying to do this? Okay, that's easy too. I can send you that. But there's a top half of that funnel, at the top 50%, which is the why questions. Okay, well, why is this feature here? Why do you have this? And why should I do this thing in my platform? That's where our team can be incredibly helpful and build confidence with the nonprofit or with our customer. If you're a software company, you're wanting to spend that time in those why questions because it helps guide and direct people. At ClickBid, we're a group of experts. I mean, we know our space really, really well. All of our staff go to events, support events, they answer the phone on Saturday nights. We have a lot of knowledge kind of floating around in this space up here in our heads that we can provide to a nonprofit. And we want to provide that. But when we spend so much of our time in the bottom half of that funnel, we lose valuable time in the top half of that funnel. So using AI to supplement that time. Like I said earlier, every communication you send out from your nonprofit does not have to be personalized. Your year-end receipts or communications, maybe a newsletter that kind of pulls a bunch of data together and creates an email that's going to go out to your donors. Those things can be automated such that it gives you the time. Write a random thank you letter to somebody that you normally would never have been able to do, like piece of paper, pencil, pen, write it down, sign it with your name, put it in an envelope and mail it. I was just thinking about you today, and I'm just so grateful that you are choosing to work with us as a nonprofit and with your donations. If you sent 30 or 40 of those a year, that would be phenomenal for you to have the time to do that. Well, yeah, Matt, or a nonprofit full of volunteers. We don't have, well, that's where AI can start providing. If goal one is being accomplished, meaning you're getting your data organized, then goal two should be easier because you can then go to your CRM. How can you help me build a newsletter that will work for January, February, March, whatever? And it'll do 90% of the work. You have to just tweak a few things and you just save 3 or 4 hours. Now those 3 or 4 hours can be sent handwriting some personalized notes. Now you're operating in that top 50%, that personalization, the why questions. And really the why questions is just being customized and thoughtful for the individual person that you're working with, not just answering the basic. All right. So the last thing is I'm always a meat and potatoes person. Like I said, I listen to a lot of videos and podcasts and things like that. And I like to put meat on the bone, practical things. What am I going to do today? So how are we going to get these two things accomplished? Well, you're definitely not going to do it alone. I've tried a lot of things, starting companies, starting little side projects, starting workout plans, started running. If I'm not accountable to someone or I don't have people that I'm working with, it's not going to happen. So you need to set some very, very tangible, I would call them 90-day goals. Some of you are familiar with EOS. That's what we use in our company. But the concept is you take something that you want to accomplish. You picture yourself 90 days in the future and say, if I were happy with something that I did, what would that be? Write it down. And not just, think about it or, that sounds good. I'll work on that. No, write it down physically. Get a big old Sharpie, write it on the wall if you have to. And that would be actually kind of cool. If you had a space in your office where you could just, first 90 days, this is what I'm doing. And then at the end of the year, it's written on the wall. But it's a big thing that you want to get accomplished because there's going to be a million little things between now and the next 90 days that are going to try and disrupt that one big thing. But if you have that lighthouse out there, that beacon calling you over the next 90 days, and it's written on a wall or 5 different people in your organization know that this is what you're going to be really bummed out if in 90 days this isn't done, that is going to help you get there. So honestly, that's it. If I'm my data, for instance, if I'm going to take my data and I'm going to spend the next 90 days, then okay, keep it simple. Over between now and the next 90 days, I want to have a document that outlines all of our data. Where is it? And I think you'd be surprised at where it is. It's everything from emails, voicemails, podcasts, Google Docs, Microsoft 365. Somebody over here uses a Remarkable tablet. So they have like 37 little personal notes. Then you've got a Virtuous over here. And then somebody else was kicking the tires of another CRM that they were trying to vibe code. You would be shocked. So if you get that list of things, where is your data? Then in 90 days, you can say, boom, this is my tangible thing that I did in 90 days. And I'm also, again, keeping it human. Then you can say, okay, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to write a letter, handwrite it. It's going to look like garbage probably because I haven't handwritten anything in so long, to one of my favorite donors or a donor that I haven't talked to in 6 months. And so those things, they're going to be very tangible. I'm going to get those done. Again, this isn't rocket surgery, as I say. I mean, it's very simple. But I think walking through these exercises, physically going through them is really what gets them accomplished. And setting that one thing out there into the future that you want to hit is going to be really, really helpful. Athletes figured this out. Sports teams figured this out. And if you hit it or not, you still made progress. And I think that's really important. So anyway, just, send me your thoughts. If there's something in specific that you want me to talk about, I'm always happy to take requests. So I hope you guys have a great New Year's, and we will see you in 2026.